His throat tightened. 3 lawyers in expensive suits stood silently in his cramped apartment doorway, waiting for him to speak. How could a simple act of kindness, sharing his breakfast sandwich with a homeless woman on a cold morning, lead to this moment? Marcus never imagined that the frail woman huddled in the subway station would change his life forever. But as he opened the envelope, he realized some acts of kindness ripple outward in ways we can never predict. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories that remind us of the unexpected connections that shape our lives. Marcus Jenkins had never considered himself special. At 32, he lived alone in a modest 1-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, working as a graphic designer for a small marketing firm. His life followed a comfortable routine: wake up at 6:30, shower, dress, grab breakfast at Sal's Deli on the corner, then catch the 7:45 subway to Manhattan. The predictability suited him. After his mother's death 3 years ago, routine became his anchor in a world that suddenly felt unsteady. That Tuesday in November began like any other. The air had turned sharp with the promise of winter, and Marcus pulled his scarf tighter as he left his apartment building. The sky hung gray and heavy, threatening snow. He walked briskly to Sal's, ordered his usual, egg and cheese on a sesame bagel with a large coffee, and headed toward the subway station. He was halfway down the station steps when he noticed her. Most commuters hurried past without a glance, but something made Marcus pause. She sat against the wall, partially hidden behind a column, a small cardboard sign propped against her knees: "Anything helps. God bless." Her face was weathered, deep lines etched around eyes that stared vacantly at the floor. Her clothes, several layers of mismatched garments, hung loosely on her thin frame. But it was her hands that caught Marcus's attention, red and raw from the cold, trembling slightly as they clutched a thin blanket around her shoulders. Marcus had seen homeless people in the subway stations before. He occasionally dropped spare change into cups or nodded politely as he passed. But today, something felt different. Perhaps it was the way she seemed to fold into herself, trying to disappear. Or maybe it was that she reminded him, somehow, of his mother in her final days, that same fragility, that same quiet dignity even in suffering. Before he could second-guess himself, Marcus changed course and approached her. "Excuse me," he said softly. The woman looked up, wariness immediately replacing the emptiness in her eyes. She'd learned to be suspicious of unexpected attention. "I thought you might be hungry." Marcus held out the paper bag containing his breakfast. "It's just a bagel sandwich, but it's still warm." She stared at the bag for a long moment, then at Marcus's face, searching for the catch, the cruelty that so often followed seeming kindness on the streets. "I'm not asking for anything," Marcus added quickly. "I can get another one." Slowly, her hand reached out and took the bag. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice rough from disuse. Marcus nodded, suddenly embarrassed by the smallness of his gesture against the enormity of her situation. He placed his coffee cup beside her and turned to leave. "My name is Eleanor," she called after him. He turned back, surprised. "I'm Marcus." "Thank you, Marcus." She offered a smile, small but genuine, that transformed her face, momentarily lifting years of hardship. Marcus nodded again and continued down the stairs, already late for his train. By the time he bought another breakfast and arrived at work, the encounter had begun to fade beneath the demands of his day. He thought of Eleanor occasionally over the next few days, looking for her whenever he passed through that station, but she wasn't there. After a week, she became just another fleeting connection in the city of 8 million stories. Until the lawyers knocked on his door. 3 weeks after that November morning, Marcus returned home from work to find a business card slipped under his door. Harriman, Weiss and Lowell, attorneys at law, was embossed in elegant script, with a handwritten note on the back: "Mr. Jenkins, please contact our office regarding an urgent matter. We will return tomorrow at 6 p.m. Marcus stared at the card, racking his brain for what possible, urgent matter would bring lawyers to his door. He wasn't being sued, as far as he knew. He paid his taxes, had minimal debt, and kept to himself. He called the number on the card, but it went to voicemail after hours. He barely slept that night, anxiety gnawing at him. By the time 6 p.m. arrived the following day, he had convinced himself of a dozen catastrophic scenarios, from identity theft to being framed for a crime. The knock, when it came, was firm and authoritative. Marcus took a deep breath and opened the door to find 3 people in the hallway, 2 men and a woman, all in tailored suits that probably cost more than his monthly rent. "Marcus Jenkins?" the woman asked. She was in her 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a tight bun and sharp eyes that seemed to catalog everything about him in seconds. "Yes," Marcus replied, his mouth suddenly dry. "I'm Catherine Weiss. These are my colleagues, James Harriman and David Lowell. May we come in? We have a matter of some importance to discuss with you." Marcus stepped aside, acutely aware of his apartment's modest furnishings and the dirty coffee mug he'd left on the counter that morning. The lawyer settled onto his small sofa while he perched nervously on the edge of his armchair. "Mr. Jenkins," Catherine began, "do you recall meeting a woman named Eleanor Blackwood approximately 3 weeks ago?" Marcus blinked in confusion. "Eleanor, the woman at the subway station? Is she okay?" The lawyers exchanged glances. "Eleanor Blackwood passed away 4 days ago," James Harriman said gently. A wave of sadness washed over Marcus. He had only spoken to Eleanor for a moment, but her face had stayed with him, that smile of genuine gratitude over such a small kindness. "I'm sorry to hear that," he said quietly. "But I don't understand why you're here." Catherine Weiss reached into her briefcase and removed a manila envelope. "Eleanor Blackwood was not always homeless, Mr. Jenkins. Until 5 years ago, she was Eleanor Blackwood Hayes, widow of industrialist Richard Hayes and majority shareholder of Hayes International." Marcus stared at her, certain he had misheard. Hayes International was a multinational corporation with interests in everything from pharmaceuticals to real estate. Even he recognized the name. "That's impossible," he said. "The woman I met was homeless." "Yes." Catherine nodded. "Eleanor suffered from severe bipolar disorder most of her adult life. After her husband died, she experienced a profound depressive episode and disappeared. Her family searched for years but couldn't find her. She had been living on the streets for nearly 3 years when you met her." Marcus's mind reeled, trying to reconcile the frail woman in the subway with the wealthy widow Catherine described. 2 weeks ago, Catherine continued, Eleanor checked herself into Bellevue Hospital. Her condition had deteriorated significantly: pneumonia, malnutrition, exposure. Before she died, she was lucid enough to make changes to her will and provide specific instructions to our firm. She handed Marcus the manila envelope. His hands trembled as he took it. Eleanor kept a journal during her time on the streets. In it, she documented the cruelty and indifference she experienced, but also the rare moments of kindness. You were mentioned in her final entry. Marcus opened the envelope and pulled out a photocopy of a handwritten page. Asterisk November 12th, a young man named Marcus gave me his breakfast today. He didn't film it for social media. Didn't want recognition. Just saw another human being in need and responded with kindness. First time in months someone looked me in the eye and spoke to me like a person. Reminded me there's still good in this world. If I ever find my way back, I need to remember this feeling. Asterisk. Marcus felt his throat tighten as he read Eleanor's words. He looked up at the lawyers, still confused about why they were in his apartment. David Lowell, who had remained silent until now, leaned forward. Eleanor's final instructions were very specific, Mr. Jenkins. She wanted to acknowledge those who showed her kindness when she had nothing to offer in return. Catherine removed another document from her briefcase. Eleanor Blackwood Hayes left an estate valued at approximately $4.2 billion. The majority goes to various charitable foundations, particularly those focused on mental health and homelessness. She handed the document to Marcus. She also left specific bequests to individuals. You are named as a beneficiary. Marcus stared at the paper, the legal terminology swimming before his eyes until he focused on a single line, to Marcus Jenkins, who restored my faith in humanity with a simple act of kindness. I leave the sum of $20 million and my property in the Catskills. The room seemed to tilt. This is a mistake, Marcus whispered. All I did was give her a sandwich. Catherine smiled, the first real warmth she had shown. Eleanor didn't see it that way. In her words, when you have nothing, a small kindness becomes everything. She believed that genuine compassion should be rewarded, especially in a world that increasingly values performative charity over quiet decency. Marcus sat back, overwhelmed. $20 million. A house. All for a $5 breakfast he would have shared with anyone in need. There's more, James added. Eleanor established a foundation to address homelessness and mental health care in New York City. Her will expresses her wish that you serve on its board of directors, though that's entirely optional. Why me? Marcus asked. I'm not qualified for something like that. Eleanor believed you possessed something more valuable than qualifications, genuine empathy. She wrote that she wanted people who see the humanity in others to help shape how we care for the most vulnerable. Marcus stood and walked to his window, looking out at the Brooklyn street below. People hurried past each other, eyes down, absorbed in their own worlds. How many Eleanors were out there, invisible to the rushing crowds? I'll do it, he said finally, turning back to the lawyers. Not the money, I mean, I don't know what to do about that yet. But the foundation. I want to help. Catherine nodded, a look of approval crossing her face. Eleanor thought you might say that. The next few months passed in a blur for Marcus. The inheritance process was complex, involving verification of his identity, tax considerations, and legal formalities. He continued working at his design job, telling no one about his sudden change in fortune while he processed what had happened. He visited Eleanor's grave, a simple marker in a quiet cemetery upstate, far from the Hayes family plot where her husband was buried. Marcus brought daisies, having learned from Catherine that they were Eleanor's favorite. He stood there for a long time, trying to reconcile the woman he had briefly met with the complex person he was coming to know through her journals, which her lawyers had shared with him. Eleanor Blackwood Hayes had been brilliant, troubled, generous, and ultimately lost, a woman who had everything and then nothing, who experienced both the heights of privilege and the depths of societal neglect. In her journals, she wrote about the invisibility of homelessness, how people's eyes slid past her as if she were a ghost. Marcus's simple act of seeing her, truly seeing her, had meant everything. The property in the Catskills turned out to be a modest but beautiful cabin on 30 acres of wooded land. Eleanor had purchased it years before her disappearance, a retreat from the social obligations that came with her husband's wealth. Marcus visited on weekends, finding unexpected peace in the quiet forest and the simple structure that seemed to embody Eleanor's true spirit more than any mansion could have. As for the money, Marcus moved cautiously. He paid off his student loans and his mother's remaining medical bills. He established a scholarship at his former community college. But mostly, he focused on the foundation, the Eleanor Blackwood Foundation for Dignity and Mental Health. Working with Catherine Weiss and a team of experts in homelessness and mental health care, Marcus helped shape the foundation's mission, to create programs that addressed not just the physical needs of homeless individuals but their dignity and humanity as well. They funded initiatives for mental health outreach, housing first programs, and advocacy for policy changes. Marcus discovered he had a talent for this work. His design background helped him communicate complex issues effectively, and his natural empathy allowed him to build bridges between different stakeholders. For the first time in his life, he felt truly purposeful. 6 months after the lawyer's visit, Marcus found himself speaking at the foundation's inaugural event. Standing at the podium before an audience of donors, community leaders, and social service providers, he felt a momentary panic. Then he thought of Eleanor, her courage, her vulnerability, her vision for a more compassionate world. "I never set out to change anyone's life," he began. "I just saw someone who was hungry and shared what I had. It was the smallest of gestures, something any of us might do without thinking twice. But Eleanor Blackwood taught me that there are no small kindnesses when you're facing the world alone." He paused, looking out at the attentive faces. Eleanor could have used her fortune to reward grand gestures or to support only those with impressive credentials. Instead, she chose to honor the simple human connection that happens when we truly see each other. Her legacy isn't just about money, it's about recognizing the dignity in every person, regardless of their circumstances. Marcus gestured to the foundation's logo projected behind him, a simple design of hands reaching toward each other, forming a shelter. The Eleanor Blackwood Foundation exists because one woman experienced both extraordinary privilege and extreme marginalization in a single lifetime. She knew firsthand that the difference between those states is often just circumstance and support. Our mission is to bridge that gap, to create a world where no one becomes invisible, where mental illness doesn't lead to abandonment, and where kindness is the rule rather than the exception. As he continued his speech, Marcus noticed a woman at the back of the room. She was well-dressed but had the weathered face of someone who had known hardship. Their eyes met briefly, and she nodded in recognition, not of Marcus personally, but of something in his words that resonated with her experience. Later, as guests mingled during the reception, she approached him. "I was homeless for 3 years," she said without preamble. "Now I'm a social worker. I wanted to thank you for what you're doing here." "I'm just trying to honor Eleanor's vision," Marcus replied. "It's more than that," the woman said. "You're helping people understand that homelessness isn't an identity, it's a situation. And that small moments of human connection can be lifelines when you're drowning." They talked for nearly an hour. Her name was Sophia, and she had overcome addiction and homelessness to rebuild her life. By the end of their conversation, Marcus had invited her to join the Foundation's Community Advisory Board, recognizing that her lived experience was exactly the perspective they needed. 1 year to the day after his encounter with Eleanor, Marcus returned to the subway station where they had met. He carried a bouquet of daisies, which he placed against the wall where she had sat. Then he set up a small table with coffee, bagels, and sandwiches from Sal's Deli. A handwritten sign read, "In memory of Eleanor. Please take what you need." Marcus stood nearby, offering food to anyone who approached, commuters rushing to work, maintenance workers on break, and those who called the subway their temporary shelter. Some hurried past, but many stopped, curious about the impromptu memorial. To those who asked, Marcus told Eleanor's story, not the sensational version about a billionaire's widow and an unexpected inheritance, but the human story of a woman who had suffered, who had been invisible, and who had still found the capacity to recognize kindness and hope for a better world. By midday, word had spread. Volunteers from the foundation joined him, bringing more food and essentials to distribute. Local news crews arrived, drawn by the unusual gathering. Marcus spoke briefly on camera, not about himself but about the foundation's work and the epidemic of invisibility that affects those experiencing homelessness. As evening approached, Marcus packed up the remaining supplies. A young man helped him fold the table, then hesitated. "I've been sleeping in the park for 2 weeks," he admitted quietly. "Lost my job, then my apartment. Been too ashamed to tell anyone." Marcus looked at him, really looked at him, the way he had looked at Eleanor that November morning. "What's your name?" "Jason." "Jason, the foundation has an emergency housing program. No waiting list, no complicated requirements. Just a safe place while you figure out next steps." The young man's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Marcus smiled, thinking of Eleanor's journal entry. "Because you're a human being who deserves to be seen. And because someone once taught me that kindness ripples outward in ways we can never predict."